Welcome Ellen Donahue-Dalton, who's the Chief Marketing Officer for Medecision. Welcome, Ellen.
Thanks. Welcome. It's nice to be here.
Thank you so much. If you could start by just telling us a little bit about Medecision, because I'm not sure how many of our viewers know that much about Medecision.
Yeah. And we're not a household name, but we actually show up in a lot of people's lives. So our software systems take care of about 52 million Americans. And most of those Americans have chronic conditions that they're managing. As we get older, we manage more and more chronic conditions, either related to medical things or related to medical and behavioral or mental health kinds of things together. And our systems help health plans and health systems take care of those people.
Excellent. Nice. So you've been there for a long time. You've been there almost 10 years at Medecision as the Chief Marketing Officer. So tell us a little bit about your path and your journey to the role that you're in today.
Yeah, so before Medecision, I had kind of a few different chapters of life. I actually started my career in politics and was a legislative analyst during a time in the United States when many states were bringing in legalized gaming. And I got really into legalized gaming, mostly in the form initially of lotteries. But then as I started working around the world, we were working a lot in social clubs, casinos, as well as sports books and sports betting. So I had this whole first part of my career in gaming, which was just fascinating. It's where I learned a lot about consumer marketing. And that's something that is, now coming into healthcare in a big way, right? Consumer marketing, behavioral and psychographic segmentation, et cetera. So anyway, politics, gaming, then owned a consulting company for a number of years while my children were little, and while I didn't want to be on an airplane. And started to work with a number of healthcare IT and healthcare services companies, and then moved into this Medecision role about 10 years ago.
Wow. So how has your job evolved and changed in the 10 years since you've been at Medecision? Is it a lot different now than it was 10 years ago?
It is. So Medecision was a turnaround company in the first years of my time with it. And it was a longer, harder turnaround than I expected, or I think than anybody else expected. And that's always a real marketing challenge, right? Because at the time, the company was about 22 years old and had some market issues, baggages, challenges that we really had to work through. When I got there, about 40% of the customers had indicated that they were leaving. And over the first 6 months that I was there, I personally spoke to the main buyer in every single one of those customers and tried to figure out, what are we going to do? What's the path forward here? We ended up doing a sort of a lightweight rebranding in, I think, 2013. To even just sort of clear the air and try to forge a new path for ourselves. And here we are 7 years later, and we're about to do another one, probably much bigger and broader. So certainly going from a turnaround to an at-scale company, that has changed. The amount of tools and quantitative analysis that we're able to do now has just really skyrocketed, which I love.
Yeah.
And I have responsibility also for experience. So the blend in an organization where someone is looking at customer experience and consumer experience, which for us are members and patients, and then what those experience points have to be in order to generate loyalty or in order to really be able to optimize value for those customers. That's something that actually I started doing it just a couple of years ago, and it's been really mind expanding.
I'll bet.
In terms of how you market. Yeah.
Well, new tools and new challenges come with all of,
That's right.
as we've, evolved. So, what advice do you wish that you had been given much earlier in your career, or maybe advice you would give to the next generation of marketers?
Yeah. So uh, when I grew up in my marketing career, I think that it was easy to get overly focused on the achievement of what I'll sort of call tactical goals.
Mm-hmm.
Run a great campaign or create a great event or, whatever. And now it's all about impact. And one of my sort of focal points with my team going into next year's planning, budgeting, et cetera, is build impact. Unless we can create meaningful impact for our users, for our business clients, and for the way in which they create an experience for their members and patients, it's kind of not worth doing.
Right.
So to me, the old focus around, growth rates, share targets, and then kind of program level achievements, to me, have faded away into how do we build impact? How do we build impact throughout the journey that this user or this member or this patient or this business client has with us? How do we invest to drive the most amount of value and to achieve our mission? We're a very purpose-driven organization. Our mission is liberating healthcare, which for many people feels like, how are you going to take this big system and actually make it feel liberating, right? Yeah. But that's our purpose, and we're very serious about it and very committed to it.
Well, I'm now excited to ask you this next question, which is, tell us what your superpower is. Do you have a superpower?
Oh my gosh, superpower. So I think that my superpower is my eyes. I tend to see things as they connect in ways that a lot of people around me maybe haven't seen because they're, seeing other things or doing other things. I think that my leadership team counts on me today to be able to connect dots between, CX, UX, and EX. Between
help us. What do those stand for? Just for those that are.
Yeah. So between what's the customer experience that we have to create that's competitively compelling and that delivers value to them? What is the user experience? We have about 150,000 users who are hands-on key of our software every day. What is that user experience that they have to have? How does it get more streamlined? How does it help them do their jobs faster? How is it less taxing on their day-to-day life? And then what's our employee experience? How is it that our employees are connected into the customer experience and the user experience? So being able to bring those things together into the articulation of a brand and then use them to build impact, that I know that was a long answer to your question about superpower, but that's what I think that I do well for our organization. And I think that's what people count on me personally for.
I love it. So you've been there at Medecision for almost 10 years. How do you keep it fresh? How does it stay interesting? I mean, you mentioned the early time there was significantly different because you're in turnaround mode versus scale mode now.
Yeah.
But how do you keep it fresh? I mean, is the business just keeping it fresh on its own, or are the things you have to do to keep things fresh?
That's a good question because, I'm like so many other people, I'm just like you, I'm sure. I'm in my seat like 10 hours a day in front of a Zoom camera.
Right.
And one meeting ends and a minute later, the next meeting starts, right? So, so keeping it fresh is really critical. I try as much as I can to look outside of healthcare for freshness and for ideas. I have the kind of mind, like I just said, where I'm always kind of connecting dots, which I'm sure sometimes is a curse for those around me. But I do draw a lot of inspiration from other category leaders that have nothing to do with healthcare. Because if there's anything I know, it's that every single one of us is a healthcare consumer, right? Not just when we're in a hospital or a doctor's office, not just when we're choosing our insurance, really every single day. We're buying that smartwatch. We're going to the yoga class. We're, going to a nutritional counseling class for our diabetes. Whatever it is, we are consumers, and we expect healthcare to be as seamless and personalized and convenient and value oriented as we expect anything else.
So that made me want to ask you a question I was going to ask you later, but what's a brand outside of healthcare that you really admire? So, you said you sometimes seek inspiration outside of your industry. Yeah. Is there a brand that you really admire or marketing from another company?
Okay, well, this is going to sound funny because, this is COVID times. And so no one's getting on an airplane.
Right.
Anymore. But I was a heavy Delta user.
Me too. Yeah.
Right. For most of the 10 years that I have been at Medecision and even before. And even though Delta's market position is not it's not kind of the Southwest position, right? Of, we love you and you love us and all that kind of stuff. The consistency and quality of the experience that they give me. And then someone really close to me is a young pilot with them. So I sort of have this little window into what some of their employee experience is like, particularly someone who's at the beginning of her career. So I have this sense of how they're able to integrate around their brand.
Yeah.
And that's certainly one of them that I know. But there are really strong car brands that I watch and have watched for years on how they do their work. It's a little overwhelming right now trying to keep track of sort of all these influencers. But there's sort of a magic with the way that influencers have learned how to build communities. And, in some of the ways that maybe the larger brands have not done. So I also tend to watch a couple of those as well.
It's interesting. You mentioned Delta, and during these times of COVID-19, where travel has diminished significantly, I love their message. I keep hearing them say, when you're ready to fly, we're ready for you. That's the right message to send at this time, which is not like trying to force people to do something they're not going to do or don't feel comfortable doing. But when you're ready, we're ready. I love that message. Yeah. Yes,
I like it too. There was a while there at the beginning of COVID where I'm sure you were getting all of these like standard emails, we're keeping our planes clean and all of our employees will be wearing masks or whatever. And, now that's really trailed off.
Yeah.
And yet I feel like from Delta that you're absolutely right. They keep letting me know that as soon as I'm ready to hop on that plane, they're going to be providing me the same great service that I had come to expect.
Yep. And I think to your point, all of those things that you discussed are table stakes at this point. Like we assume there's going to be cleanliness measures and distancing and all the things that are important to make us feel comfortable, that we're not spreading the disease now. But Delta particularly, I think, has done a good job of being prepared for the next phase, even if we're not ready for the next phase yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of leadership, are there certain values that you want to demonstrate as a leader or that you demand from leaders that are in your team?
Yes, to both. Let me start with the second one, though. And it goes back to connecting the dots. Like I'm sure a lot of CMOs, I have teams that focus in certain program areas or, in certain functional areas. And I try as much as I can to have them co-collaborate, which is, it sounds like, well, that's an obvious thing, but a lot of times people don't co-collaborate unless they're seamlessly connected into a process, a planning process, a budgeting process. And I noticed that that if left in teams, the aperture is much smaller and tighter. As soon as we start connecting people across the group, not only, of course, do they build those human relationships, but man, does the productivity go up and the quality of the work goes way up. And of course, people's sense of fulfillment and accomplishment goes up. I've been a CMO for a number of years, and there's nothing that gets under a marketer's skin at any level of the organization other than being left out, right? Left out of the product conversation, left out of the sales meeting, left out of a business decision. Marketers feel very central to a company's growth plan, and they expect to be part of it. So being able to infect my leaders and other leaders in the company with that spirit of collaboration, so the dots can be connected, is something that I try to do. I'm not always successful. There are still people, in companies who just think sort of this is our thing, or this is my thing, and marketing will kind of let you guys know, when it's time. We have we're in the middle of a big push to Safe Agile, which is helping in some ways, but that's a really big key thing. In terms of leadership values, I tend to be, and my team, the executive team that I'm part of, tend to be sort of impatient and even like a little relentless, even though I know that sounds negative, like, relentlessly working or whatever. But this kind of desire and ambition and appetite to achieve a big vision is something to me that's really critical. I'm not sure I could survive in a culture where a big vision wasn't present,
right,
and it wasn't impactful. And so, just being part of that and really feeling like you really can't rest. You just like, when you have a mission like liberating healthcare, which is what we have.
Right.
And I mean, I have all sorts of people on my team. I have people who are just out of college. We have a number of young parents with kids who would normally be in daycare or who would normally be in school. And, now they're all at home. I tell the team, and I have for the last few years, like, this is something you're going to talk to your grandchildren.
Right.
Right. I mean, you were working in healthcare, trying to liberate the systems and the data for a better member and patient experience at a time when in 10 years, people won't even recognize that old healthcare system.
Right. So being on the edge of that transformation can be probably pretty stimulating and exciting, I would think.
Very stimulating, very exciting. I mean, you've probably had a telehealth visit, right? Unless you're
yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So, 6-8 months ago, you've probably read that telehealth adoption was down below 20%.
Right.
In some parts of the country, it was below 15%. And some of our clients have seen thousands of percent growth. So, where will it go back?
Right.
Yesterday, we were with 80 of our client organizations in a webinar, and we asked them that question. What will patient transactions next year look like? What percentage of them will be handled virtually? And most of the people, I think it was about 78% of all of the attendees said between 20% and 100%.
Yeah.
So, it's, and most of those were over 50%. It's just transformational.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of the transition to e-commerce that's happened. In that there was a point I don't know if you remember this, Ellen, but I remember early on thinking, do I really want to put my credit card in on a website? Because what if they steal my credit card number and all, now
Well,
nobody thinks twice about that, right?
yes, and you know, it's funny you said that because at MedDecision we talk about the fact that right now everyone's calling this virtual health or
Right,
digital health,
right.
right? Or telehealth. And you know what?
Soon it'll just be
Probably in
called health.
12, it's just going to be health.
Yeah,
You won't even think about going into a doctor's office, sitting for a half an hour or
right,
an hour, going, you know, and
right.
then coming out after a 4-minute visit with, you know, with nothing, maybe just a checkup. It's not going to happen that way.
The other thing I was going to mention was you talked about it's frustrating for marketers to not feel like they have a seat at the table and not feel like they are part of the action and the decisions that are being made. We actually, so at Setup, we live in the space between brands and agencies. And so we felt we were in a unique position to ask some questions about the impact of COVID on marketing. And so in April, we asked questions about how is COVID impacting demand for products and services? How is it impacting your marketing budget? And how is it impacting the morale of your team? We redid the survey in August. And interestingly, we asked one more question, which was, since COVID has begun, has marketing been elevated in importance within the organization, demoted in importance in the organization, or kept the same? Interestingly, roughly 50% of the respondents said that marketing has been elevated in importance within their organization. Another roughly 40% said it stayed about the same. And only about 10% said that marketing is less important within the organization. So I think as you're seeing a transformation in healthcare, we're also seeing a transformation in the power and importance of marketing within the larger organization, which is pretty exciting because I, for one, and it sounds like you agree, feel that marketing is a very noble profession that gets people the things that they really want and need most. And we should have a seat at the table in terms of that conversation.
Yeah, that, you know, I never thought about it that way. I never thought about it as a noble profession because we get people the things that they need most. I never thought about that, but I like that, and I think that a company that just operates at the products and services and solutions level
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't, you know, isn't purpose driven
Right.
and marketing led, um, is a company that number one, I wouldn't want to be at, but it's a company that, you know, we can call it a commodity or whatever. It's just, I don't know, this isn't a very articulate way of
That's
agreeing
okay.
with your point.
No,
But I
but
completely agree with what you're saying.
yeah, I think at the end of the day, marketing is only becoming more important to the
Yeah.
organization, not less. And we were glad to see that from the respondents. And granted, most of the respondents were marketers, marketing leaders, mostly big companies, mostly director level and above. But you know, there's a reality that marketing has become more important, and we're excited to see it because it should be.
You know, something else that I tell my teams is, when you're in marketing, uh, you have got to see around the corner, and you need to persuade everybody behind you who's
Hmm.
just trying to do this year's business, right? They're just
Hmm.
trying to
Right.
make that sale, deliver that
Hmm.
product, whatever it is. You need to make sure that they, at the right time, can see around as well and can prepare for it. But don't expect consensus because
Right.
you're not going to get it, right? Your job is to open people's eyes and to help them get prepared, and then of course, you know, do the go to market work. But you can't just do the go to market work without seeing around the corner.
And that sounds like that also includes your internal larger non-marketing team, right? So the rest of your organization, how does marketing interface with the rest of the rest of the C-suite, and then the rest of the organization that's not focused on marketing every day? I don't know. How do you communicate the value of marketing to the rest of that team?
That's an interesting question, because depending on the kind of company that it is, the value of marketing, it varies, right?
Mm-hmm.
We tend to be a product and engineering company as
Right.
a software company. So many times the company will think, well, so we're going to do our thing, right? The marketing people will help us understand market size, market opportunity, competitive differentiation, et cetera. But then we're going to build this beautiful thing. And then we're going to ask the marketing people to kind of help us get it out there.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes we're operating, that way. We're kind
Parallel.
of wrapping
Yeah.
around the product organization. And that's great. That's not a problem. But at this time of year, as we, start to go into Q4, we're really spending a lot of our time looking around the corner.
Yeah.
We're looking at where are segments of the market starting to consolidate, where to the point where their technology requirements will be more identifiable, where we can start to build solutions and go into that market. We're starting to take a look at disruptors. I mean, healthcare is going through a period of enormous transformation. So there are lots of disruptors. Some of them are household names. Some of them are little tiny companies that we've never seen before. What do those disruptors mean? What are they saying about themselves? What little gaps, what chinks in the armor are they able to penetrate into? So we're doing all of that kind of market-scaping work. In addition to just that pure, what's the opportunity for this product? And then how do we get it out there into the hands of the most people so that we can deliver value for it?
I want to shift to a different topic because, as mentioned, we live in that space between brands and agencies. So I'm just curious, how have you worked with agencies in the past? How do you envision, and are there certain things that you would never ever outsource to an agency? And are there certain things that you always would want to? I'm just curious how you work with agencies.
So I don't believe that we work with agencies particularly effectively. We have our roster of kind of our go-to partners for various things, but I wouldn't say that we've done a good job of connecting them into our strategies so that they are more integrally connected into what we need to do, for whom, why, et cetera. So I would say that we use them tactically, and I think that we have a big opportunity to use them more in a partnership.
It's interesting to hear you say that because you said earlier that marketers are frustrated by not having a seat at the table. And so I think what you're saying is we want our agencies in the future to have more of a seat at the table in the strategy part, not just the tactical and executional parts.
Yeah. And in order to be able to do that efficiently, you need to have your sort of village
Absolutely.
of partners, right? And they need to be of a size and scale and importance where, they make sense at the table. So I think that is something that we are going to be working on for next year as we start to move into this new brand strategy and brand position that I described to you earlier. And, it's interesting because, how do you know that they're going to be the right partner and have the right seat at the table? And I've really found that this is kind of a Goldilocks thing where, they can't be too big or too small, but nor can they be too comfortable with you. They have to push, and I really believe they have to push at the CMO level.
Right.
I mean, they can also push at the program level, but they really need to push at the CMO level to make sure that you're thinking through what you're doing, why. Do you have enough guardrails in place for the team to follow? Is it the right way to connect to the business and growth strategies, et cetera? A lot of times in the past, well, not a lot of times, but sometimes in the past when we've had agencies, they play right away at the program level, right? And then I never see them again.
Right.
I can see some of their work, but I wish, I wish there was more continuity.
Right. They get into the weeds really quickly, it sounds like.
Yes. The other thing I think that is really key, And I think that I think this is where agencies can improve is measurement.
Mm-hmm.
And meaningful measurement.
Mm-hmm.
Not just sort of measurement that used to work for agencies, but it's not tied back to business goals. If
We
it's
call
not
those
tied
vanity
back,
metrics. No vanity
exactly,
metrics. Yeah.
yeah. If it's not tied back to business goals, chances are we're not going to do it again. So that's really key.
Great. Well, so one more question about agencies. What traits then are you looking for in a partner that are kind of non-negotiable as you bring on a new agency or even for an existing agency partner?
I am looking for um, a shallow learning curve.
Mm,
I can't,
right.
we're sort of moving so fast
Mm-hmm.
that trying to onboard somebody into the dynamics of our space and our language set, that's a really heavy lift. So
Mm-hmm.
that is
Mm-hmm.
key. We definitely look for sort of fresh take
Yeah.
on things that is represented by past client work.
Mm-hmm.
So more than kind of the big name, oh, we worked with X big name and Y big name, more the fresh take on a constant problem.
Yeah.
That's important. And definitely fit, right? I
Yeah.
mean, like back to the Goldilocks thing, there needs to be a chemistry sync, right?
I'm
So
glad you used that word.
yeah,
We talk a lot about agencies. We usually put agencies in front of clients that have capability. They check all of the boxes, and on paper, they look great because they have the experience and the skills to do the work. But we like to put several agencies in front of the client because we can't determine chemistry.
yeah.
You may have 3 or 4 agencies that you're looking at that are all capable, but which one is going to mesh well with your team and with you?
Yeah, because if not, you're never going to get around the same table, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. So I have a couple of fun questions for you, completely
Okay.
unrelated. The first one is there a fictional story or realm in which you would most like to live? Mine is Star Wars. I think it would be so cool to live in the times of
Okay.
Star Wars, but
I would definitely choose something in the future. I don't know that I have like a name. And because I spend so much time in healthcare and I take care of a 95-year-old mom who she would probably totally resent the fact that I just said that I help take care of her. But because of that, I do think a lot about, what the next 100 years will be like,
mhm.
what life will be like, and what liberties we will have. So I'll choose that one.
Awesome. I like it. Is there a movie or a band or a book or a quote that inspires you on an ongoing basis?
So the minute you say the word quote, I think I have a dream.
Mm,
And that is an expression of a better future,
mhm.
and a better future that is impactful and beneficial and shared. And that would be my favorite quote.
Mm. Uh, you just made me think of one other thing, which is it a mandatory that marketers be optimistic?
Wow, I think so. I think so. I think it goes to that idea of peeking around the corner,
Hmm.
right? That I mean, clearly there are things to be worried about when you peek around the corner. Clearly, you have to, you have to be able to open the closets and see who's going to
Yeah,
jump
right,
out,
right.
right? But you're only doing that because you want to go around the corner. So yes, marketers have to be optimistic.
I would agree with you there. I just wanted to get your take. So, okay, last question is where do you find your greatest joy outside of work?
Well, so I have two older sons. Well, I mean, they're not old, but they're older in the fact that when COVID happened, they ended up coming home. And even though initially, like, they weren't thrilled to, be thrown out of college or
Right.
whatever, it was just awesome to be able to spend this kind of new time with
Mhm.
them, where we were having this common frame of what we could do and what we couldn't do. And it was just time that was completely unexpected, that I really enjoyed. And then during that time, I went out and bought this super fancy birdhouse thing with, like, it's like got a seed cone on one side and it's got a hummingbird feeder on the other side.
Wow.
And then we mixed up all the seed with this pepper stuff that the squirrels don't like.
Right.
And it's right outside my window. And I've attracted, like, the Audubon Society here in my
Cool.
backyard. So I've been enjoying just kind of staring at that during my COVID moments.
You've become a birder and you didn't even intend to, right?
I have become a birder. Yeah.
It's so funny what new skills we've all obtained during this time. I have
Yes.
two 10-year-olds, twin 10-year-olds that
Oh,
were warring with each other.
oh,
And so I learned how to build a wall to
oh,
separate them into their own bedrooms.
okay. See that?
So we all learn new things.
That's
thank,
funny.
thank you, YouTube, for teaching me how to build a wall.
Yes. And
Um,
for teaching us how to do everything, right?
right, right.
Yeah.
We have an agency that we work with whose one of their big clients is YouTube, and they filmed a series of videos about how it's like I learned it on YouTube, and one of them they did was an army guy who went to Iraq and was a Green Beret, and he wanted to play college football, and he learned how to become a long snapper out in the desert of Iraq,
Wow.
on YouTube. And he ended up becoming a 4-year starter at the University of Texas as a long snapper, and
Wow.
fulfilled his lifelong, 30 something year old freshman in college, and fulfilled his lifelong dream. And he learned it on YouTube, which I thought was so cool.
That is a great story. What'd you build your wall out of?
Drywall, I mean,
Oh,
studs and drywall and insulation and paint and mud and paint and tape. And
oh
I
my
have pictures
gosh.
documenting the process. And this is the fun part. I ran out of insulation, kind of one little section near the end. And so I asked the kids to give me clothes that were too small for them that they'd outgrown. And I packed the little corner of the wall with children's clothing, which will make for an interesting, if anybody ever tears down that wall, they'll be curious about why there's kids' clothes stuffed in the middle.
That's hysterical. Well, good for you.
Thank
Good
you.
for you.
But anyway, Ellen Donahue-Dalton from Medecision, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an amazing conversation. I appreciate it.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me. It was great to get to know you a little bit more.